Welcome to another episode. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, the co-founder of USDT0, Lorenzo. Lorenzo, thanks for doing this and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. It's the first time I'm on a podcast, but very happy to do it with you and quite excited to deep dive into the specifics.
I've been looking forward to having this conversation since we met in Dubai for the first time, and I'm like super glad that we get to do this because like every other guest has so many appearances on different podcasts and different like platforms, right? So they have a rehearsed story. So I'm kind of glad that we get to do this for the first time with you.
Pleasure. My pleasure is mine. I mean, I'm a big fan of what you guys have created with this podcast, and I've seen a lot of very big guests here, so I'm just excited to be here and be able to shed a little bit more light on what we're doing over at USDT0.
Awesome. So before we get into USDT0, I do want to spend a little bit more time on getting to learn more about your crypto journey and like what has your journey been like? What have you been up to in the crypto industry till now?
Yeah, sounds good. So, I mean, I'm relatively younger. I'm 25, but I've been around crypto-related stuff for all my life. A lot of people, both in my close circle of friends and in my family, have been around crypto, and I very much remember when I spent my one of my first summers working by saving those couple €100 in Italy to buy my first bitcoins, and then obviously lose them because I had no idea how to handle private keys and stuff like that. So I immediately got hacked and lost them all. Most expensive mistake of my life yet. So that was something good. But I started doing something a little bit more active in the space in late 2020, start of 2021. I was doing my second year of uni and I just fell basically in love with the entirety of the DeFi ecosystem that was growing up and basically being born in that period. I'm a big fan of decentralized financial infrastructure. I've always been extremely fascinated firstly by the technology, but then more importantly by the ethos that those systems are built behind, if you will. So I started doing this kind of stuff. I've been contributing to multiple DAOs, looking a little bit around the space. And then in 2022, when USDC depegged, I basically realized that there was a very big problem in the way we were building decentralized financial systems, which was that there was a heavy dependency on one single centralized stablecoins. Back in the days, most large blue chips were focusing on USDC. And when USDC depegged because of the whole Silicon Valley Bank shenanigans, I basically realized that there was a single point of failure very, very big. So I started doing everything that I could to contribute towards what I thought was the best solution, which was the Tether ecosystem. And we've been working together with the Tether team for a lot of time. I was one of the persons that was leading the expansion of Alloy, alloy.tether.io. It's basically a new stablecoin denominated in US dollar, backed only by Tether Gold on a decentralized basis. So the issuance itself is centralized, but the system that is using it to keep track of the CDP positions is effectively an on-chain CDP position, right? It's an effective smart contract. So we started by doing that. Following shortly after, my team and I were involved in some native deployments of USDT. And while we were executing those native deployments, we basically realized that there was a huge problem in the way Tether was firstly expanding to new chains, and secondly, moving between chains that it was already supported. And that's basically when the whole idea about USDT0 came to be, and where me and my other co-founders and the rest of our team started working day and night to basically bring USDT0 to fruition, if you will.
Amazing. I think you've touched on a lot of threads that we're going to dig deeper in the conversation. I want to kind of get your insight on why are you so bullish on USDT in the first place, right? Because you're now building your whole company around this one token. And of course, Tether has been the backbone of the crypto infrastructure or the crypto ecosystem for the last decade. But I want to hear it from you, like why you're so bullish on Tether. What do you think is the role of USDT in shaping the future of the industry in a way?
Yeah, that's a very good question, honestly. And I mean, before answering, I should have a disclaimer saying that I'm very, very biased. I love USDT. I only hold USDT as a centralized stablecoin, and I've been working closely with Paolo and the rest of the USDT team for the good part of the last 4 years of my life, right? And I've grown to meet the team, and I've grown to meet the ethos that they use to actually build the whole ecosystem that they have, right? And honestly, I have not yet come across a group of people that are sharing the same strive towards freedom in every space of what they're building. They're building financial freedom technology. They're building freedom of speech technology. They're now focusing heavily on freedom of information technology with their investment in Rumble. And it's just very, very nice to be able to be close to people that, despite having what is effectively the most profitable company on planet Earth, they don't really care about money. They care about building tools that people and the last people on Earth, if you will, are going to be able to use and are going to be able to use to revolutionize their life. So this is the first thing. And then obviously, secondly, is the fact that Tether is effectively the infrastructure layer for basically all of crypto now, especially now that there is so much focus against stablecoin. Everything basically flows through them. And if you match that with the fact that they are Bitcoiners at heart, and everybody at Tether is severely focused on making sure that Tether and Bitcoin grow at the same time, you get a perfect mix you get the perfect mix for people that are revolutionizing our space, if you will.
I mean, USDT goes back to, I think, 2013, 2014. Like the roots of crypto in a way was started with USDT. Like I was reading Arthur Hare's article last week, and then he goes through the entire history of how USDT was born, and then all of the trails in Greater China, and then how stablecoins were born in a way, right? So I feel like a lot of the new people in crypto kind of do not understand the importance of USDT and how it basically was the only stable coin for the longest time in the entire ecosystem.
100%. And I mean, they basically invented the technology behind stablecoins. And I mean, I've heard a lot of stories on why this whole thing was created, but initially it was meant to be just a better tool to move money between centralized exchanges, because back in the days, there was a lot of arbitrage opportunities on the Bitcoin pricing across different centralized exchanges, because if you had to wait 4 days to get a bank wire from exchange A to exchange B, you had a lot of problem arbing it successfully. So when Tether first came out with USDT, the arbitrage opportunities were basically nullified, because you're basically removing barriers between markets, which makes markets more efficient, and which therefore makes so that the law of one price is actually held. And that was the first thing that happened. And the second thing that happened was that the moment that other ecosystems started launching their own tokens and their own ICO and all this kind of stuff, the easiest way to pair it against was USDT, because you didn't want to pair it only against BTC, because then you're also exposed to the volatility of BTC going up and down. But all of a sudden, you could pair it against USDT and have way less correlation between those assets. And that was just the start of the whole thing. And now, 10 years later, we're working in, we're living in a world where you have the Senate of the United States passing bills on the stablecoin, on the technology that they created. And this is something that I never asked Paolo and the rest of the Tether team, but I assume it must feel pretty surreal to have the largest and the most powerful nation on planet Earth pushing legislature on a technology that you invented when nobody had the idea and nobody believed in you. So it must be something pretty crazy, I guess.
I mean, I think Paolo featured on one of the podcasts on Bankless, and then they asked him this question, right? And then he was talking about how it almost feels like validation of their thesis that they saw this almost like 10 years ago. But then it also felt like this was just the beginning, because these teams are only now starting to realize that there is a future with stablecoins, but they've been building for the last 10 years, and they've been like working for this exact moment, so now that they can accelerate. But I want to talk about how, like, when USDT launched, there was suddenly a way for USD to come on chain, right? Like there was a global form of USD on chain. With USDT0, now there's like a multi-chain form of USDT. So I want to get into like, why is it important for USDT to have this multi-chain form of USDT?
Yeah, sounds good. So before we start, I'm a big supporter of the omnichain narrative. I've been working in and out and together with the Layer0 team for a long, long time. And since late 2021, when BSC started to come out and all those other weird other chains basically came out to rival Ethereum, it was pretty clear to me from the beginning the fact that we are one day going to live in an omnichain world. If we live in an omnichain world, it's fundamentally important to build railways where we can easily and in a permissionless way move assets between chains. This situation has always been very, very tricky for USDT, right? Because you currently have the native USDT deployments, which are the ones that are officially deployed by Tether, and that are one that allow you to directly issue and redeem on a certain chain. You had bridged versions, either by third parties or by like L1, L2s, like bridges, like what Arbitrum used to be before we took it over, what Polygon currently has, what the old version of USDT and Optimism had. And then you had other versions like IOUs. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Binance pegged USD, I think that's called, which is the representation that USDT has on Binance Smart Chain, around 6.5 billion last I checked, which is just, it's effectively a trust me bro, right? We have the money, it's in our balance sheet, and we obviously trust Binance because the balance sheet is very, very high, but there is no way to actually verify it on chain. So we lived in this world where if you were an ecosystem and you were trying to get some representation of USDT on your chain, you had two options. Either you would wait until you were large enough to get a native deployment, or you would go with someone else, with some other version that you knew sooner or later you would have had to change to native if you ever were eligible for those kind of deployments. That's what happened on Avalanche, if you remember, with USDT and USDT.T, which from a chain perspective is extremely expensive and something very, very bad. So this is the setup standards across the ecosystem, and all of it had one problem in common. It was extremely difficult to move assets between chains. Like, think if you had I don't know, USDT on Polygon and you wanted to send it over to Tron. You first had to bring it back to Ethereum and then find a solution that would allow you to go from Ethereum to Tron. Most cases that would have been a centralized solution, like a centralized exchange. In some rare occasions, you had the chance to do it with decentralized solution like bridges, effectively. Mm-hmm. So when we saw that problem, we were basically in a situation where we were like, this is definitely hurting the growth of USDT, because USDT is going amazing on Tron and Ethereum, but on the other networks, pending some exclusion, it always had a little bit more difficulty to grow. So what if we just give a tool for all of these ecosystems that are serious about it and they want to grow the USDT supply on their chain, to basically have a fully interoperable version that allows them to just remove barriers between the already established ecosystems and their new playground. And then once we removed those barriers, we didn't know what was going to happen, but very quickly and very fast it became obvious what effectively would have happened, which was the fact that people would just use it and use it a ton. So that's why USDT0 was created. We launched it first on Inc. Around 2 weeks after Tether gave us ownership of the contract on Arbitrum, which was definitely very, very important. That allows us to start serving around, I think it's 2 million individual addresses on Arbitrum, and more than 1.3 billion USDT were migrated in one transaction. And then from there on, we just started to make sure that every new and exciting ecosystem coming up would have been able to be included in the USDT0 network. Probably know about Plasma. They recently had more than $1 billion locked in their pre-deposit campaign. All of that $1 billion will be transferred into USDT0 when the chain launches. You have other ecosystems like Mega-ETH that are going to come out with the USDT0 deployment. You have older ecosystems like Optimism that decided to shift over from their previous bridge USDT deployment to USDT0. And the reason why is very simple. We are basically creating a unified liquidity layer across all of those ecosystems where users can freely move their assets between chains completely for free. And this is something very important and something that we really cared about when we were designing this system. We did not want the end user to have to pay anything for bridging the assets.
I mean, so one of the reasons that you mentioned was, of course, easier chain expansion, right? Like with older stablecoins, there's no like natural way to move them to another ecosystem natively. And then USDT0 with layer 0 is on top of like layer 0 kind of unlocks that for USDT. But then you also mentioned how like Binance had their version of USDT, and then it was like a trust me bro implementation, right? So what makes USDT0 a more trustworthy implementation? Because any team can in a way like store some USDT on a chain and then like say that, okay, our new stablecoin is backed by USDT and just like trust us. So what makes your implementation safer and more trustworthy than the other ones?
Yeah, so we're built on the OFT standard, right? And I obviously don't have to explain either to you or your audience what the OFT standard is, like I usually have to do in VD calls, but we're built using the OFT standard, and we basically have one single lockbox, so we call it. It's a smart contract on Ethereum, where every single USDT0 in the world is backed on. So that effectively means that you can go to our smart contract and verify at all points in times the fact that for every single USDT0 in the world, there is one USDT being locked in that single smart contract. Now, this may look like something obvious for us DeFi native people, but it's a big step forward for all of those ecosystems that are just struggling and trying to find a way to represent USDT on their own chain. And another cool thing that you can do thanks to our design is that you can build fail-safes that are operated and integrated by third parties. So I don't know if you're familiar, but Chaos Labs are our main risk providers. They're now working on something called pre-crime oracles, which effectively allows a third-party infrastructure to have a fail-safe in our system. So think about it like this. You are, I don't know, Morpho or any other lending market, and you're accepting USDT0 as collateral. You want to have a solution that allows you to say, if at any point in time, for whatever reason, USDT0 was to become unbacked, for whatever reason, as I said, technical security risk, et cetera, I can touch on to the insane amount of money that we spent on security as well as all of our security practices later on, if you will. But let's assume that you have this set up, then if for whatever reason the amount backing it on Ethereum is no longer the same that the total supply on all chains, then we can just have a fail-safe that stops our lending market and makes sure that we're not going to be exposed to this risk. And this is something very important, right? Like I'm a big fan of the theory that we should build resilient system for when hard times hit. Mm-hmm. And I also strongly believe that the more transparent your system is, the better and the more resilient it becomes over time, right?
But so my question is more on the lines of like, can another team also build the same implementation on top of layer zero's OFT standard? And then how should a user look at both of these implementations, right? Like, there's nothing stopping another team from issuing an omni-chain version of USDT. So in that case, I'm trying to think of, like, how should a user differentiate between your implementation and then, like, the many other implementations that may or may not exist.
Yeah, obviously the whole thing is permissionless, right? So if somebody else wanted to just copy a smart contract and try to do their own thing, they can definitely do it, but they would not be integrated into the USDT0 network.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we are gating so much the entrance to this very tightly group of chains that we're hoping it's going to be expanding heavily over the next few months, but that we still try to keep up for close to a very high level blockchain group, if you will. In those cases, we are effectively making sure that everything works out. So every time we have a deployment, we run three rounds of audits, independent, external, deployment verification. They're included into our bug bounty program, which is the fifth largest bug bounty program in the world. Stargate and Layer Zero have more than us, but we're planning on coming after them too. I was quite angry with Resolve when they kicked us off the top four, but it's okay. So we have a bug bounty program of around $6 million. We have full-on risk analytics, risk reviews. We work with Chaos Labs every time we add new chains. Our risk analysis team really deep dive into each of the chains that you integrate to make sure that they're safe to be added to the USDT0 network, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely you can try to reproduce the system, but you're not going to get the network effect, if you will, that you have if you are inside the USDT0 network. And just to give you a couple of statistics, we launched in late January on Inca. Since then, we have actually just crossed to today $7 billion in cross-chain transfer volumes. Those numbers are obviously accelerating. So we are right now looking at give or take $500 million a week in cross-chain volumes. And that's even before chains like Plasma that are completely focused on USDT launch. And that's even before we take over some other large L2 deployments, like what happened on Arbitrum, for example. So I do not really see a reason why you would try to reproduce the system. But if you do end up reproduce the system, you are still in a pretty good position because our contracts are forward compatible, right? So that effectively means that if you cannot afford a USDT0 deployment, and if your infrastructure is not ready to get a USDT0 deployment, what you can do is that you can just copy our smart contracts, grow your supply, prove your worth, and then once you're mature enough, we can just take over those deployments without having to migrate all of the supply, which is something very important and something that we find very, very, the chains keep at heart because they don't want to be in a situation like Avalanche used to be, if you will.
Makes sense. So if I understand correctly, it's like because of the open source nature of crypto, there's nothing stopping another team from kind of copying your approach to do like an omnichain USDT version. But over the last 6 to 8 months, you've built such distribution and network effects that there's only one kind of like native version of USDT on different chains at this point.
Kind of, yes. And on top of it, we also work very, very closely with the Tether team, and we have full open line of communications with them at all points in time, right? So we really want to be as involved as possible in the proliferation of USDT across all of those ecosystems. And honestly, that's something that we've seen growing pretty well, and something that we would definitely like to keep seeing in the next couple of months.
How important do you think USDT0 is strategically to USDT's like dominance in the ecosystem? Because like I feel like CCTP was launched in 2022 for USDC, and then since then they've kind of taken over the multi-chain narrative, right? Like, or that was their approach towards the multi-chain narrative. And then USDT0 launched this year, and in the last 6 months, you guys have blown everything apart in terms of adoption, right? Like you've done 7 billion in transfer volume. You've become the native USDT version on numerous chains. There's Plasma coming out. There's like I think stable chain was announced yesterday. But from a
Yep.
strategic perspective, like how important is this for USDT's continued growth?
Yeah. So let's start by a couple of notions. First of all, the growth of USDT0 is directly correlated with the growth of USDT, right? Because if every single time USDT0 is issued on a chain, native USDT needs to be locked on Ethereum. That effectively means that for every USDT0 in circulation, there is a USDT backing it, which clearly aligns the interests of Tether with ours. Then on top of it, there's basically a UX answer to this. Before our existence, USDT was very, very fragmented. You had the same asset, but it felt totally disconnected and very fragmented depending on the chain that you were on. Now that we exist, we basically fixed that. And with USDT0, with the USDT0 infra, you can now move USDT anywhere you want without needing to, wrap it, swap it, bridge it, deposit it on a centralized exchange. You can just do it all on your own in a fully permissionless way and with the same standard that native Tether contracts used to be deployed.
I mean, in a way, you're tasked with the expansion of the most important asset in crypto, right? So, like, does the
It's one
scale
way
of
to
what
see
you,
it.
yeah, does the scale of what you're doing ever kind of like stress you out?
So that's a good one, I guess. Um, yes and no, meaning that we obviously feel the enormous responsibility that we have on our shoulders, and we take this very, very seriously. But expanding USDT also has a lot of upside, as you can imagine. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just giving the best possible asset on the planet, um, one step forward, if you will. So it's on one side, it's quite easy because you can just give this asset to people and people will just use it without needing to be paid, without needing to be incentivized. They just trust the asset and they trust using it. On the other hand, though, as I said, it is something that we feel very, very, we feel a lot of responsibility about it. And that's why we're focusing so much and we have such strict parameters for when we do everything and when we expand to new chains, if you will.
And then, like, what's been your experience in the first 6 to 8 months? Like, what has been the reception from centralized exchanges, chains towards this new omnichain version of USDT? Like, are they open to it? Do they understand it already, or is there like a knowledge gap yet?
It's been insane. Honestly, it's been quite insane because we launched it thinking that we would have had a way lower adoption curve. But because of the numbers I told you before, that definitely didn't happen, right? Like the moment we took over Arbitrum, centralized exchanges started using it on a daily basis to rebalancing their float supply. Payment infrastructure started to do the same. I cannot tell you who, but there is another large layer two that is soon going to be migrated in the same way that Arbitrum happened to USDT0. And we've been definitely surprised by how fast the adoption happened. There's still some challenges. We work very, very closely, also thanks to the Tether team, with all the large centralized exchanges. The immediate reaction that we got from everyone was that everybody loved us because, I mean, before, if you had to rebalance your float supply, now, I mean, I'm going to explain what the float supply is. You probably know it, but when you're a centralized exchange and you have to process deposit and withdrawals, you need to have a certain amount of inventory on each of the chains that you open for deposits and withdrawals, right? And number one, that capital is all sitting there idle. You're not getting any yield on that. You're not putting it to use. You're just having it sitting there waiting for somebody to initiate a withdrawal. And secondly, if some of your chains get too disbalanced, you may need to go directly with the Tether team to the Tether team and do something that is called a chain swap. You've probably seen Paolo tweeting about it and Whale Alert seeing it. Basically, you do what we do, but rather than doing it in a fully permissionless way, you do it directly with the Tether team through multi-sig transactions, which are slow, expensive, and can take 3 weeks to process one of those, right? So everybody felt the need for something like this, and the reception we got was amazing. Not only from centralized exchanges, which still they're very slow, right? Like centralized exchanges are big, slow giants that are extremely profitable right now, and that takes time to explain to them new technology. But payment processors immediately loved it. Large hedge funds immediately loved it as well, because if you were a hedge fund before the launch of USDT0 and you wanted to basically put your capital to use in the, I don't know, in DeFi or in somewhere like that, in some places like that, you could not really do it with USDT. Why? Because if you had to pay 20, 30, 40 bips to bridge 100 million USDT between chains, that immediately is a big, big problem for you. And it eats up in your profits when you're deploying your capital onto certain chains. Now that USDT0 exists, we are effectively allowing you to move one USDT0 or 1 billion USDT0 for the exact same price and in a matter of minutes, which opens up a whole new suite of farming opportunities for all of those large funds, decentralized and centralized and decentralized, by the way. Like, I cannot tell you who, but there is a very large protocol that farms with large amounts of stablecoins to produce a saving rate, if you will. There were some of the first ones to basically reach out to us and be like, guys, we've literally been waiting for this thing for the last 2 years and a half. Thank you for building it. How can we work together? And the overall reaction was really amazing. And one thing that I should say is that it's accelerating. Like every week, I'm getting more and more connection with people that are just very, very happy to integrate our infrastructure. One, because it's free, and two, because it's designed quite well on a UI UX basis.
I mean, so that's been the strongest product market fit in a way, right? Like for centralized exchanges or whales of every kind, like hedge funds, they can now rebalance across chains with USDT by just minting and burning. And there's like, I don't know if you guys charge a fee right now, but there's basically no slippage. You can do any size,
We charge no
any
fee.
chain. Okay, perfect. So there's basically no barrier.
Yeah, our theory is that we should not create barriers between ecosystems. The best ecosystem should win, and we should basically do the best possible. We should take all of our efforts to make sure that we remove those barriers between chains. So you can move one USDT, or you can move a billion USDT, and you're going to pay the exact same amount, which is the gas fee, and nothing else. And we have no plan in the short term or long term to add anything like that. We have a tiny fee for our second product, which is called the Legacy Mesh, which is a more traditional pool-to-pool bridging infrastructure that deals with native USDT deployments. Tron, in this specific moment, it's connecting Tron, Ton, Ethereum, and Arbitrum, where there is a USDT0 deployment, but we basically use Arbitrum as our hop chain, if you will. So if you want to go from Tron to Plasma, you're going to be able to do Tron Arbitrum, Arbitrum Plasma, all in one transaction. For the Tron Arbitrum leg, or the Tron Ton or Tron Ethereum, we do charge around 3 bips. It used to be 10, but we are always trying to reduce it as much as feasibly possible. And then we, in the back end, we mint and burn Tether directly with Bitfinex or other centralized providers to basically keep those pools at balance. I have to say, we have not seen as much uptakes as we have seen for the Legacy Mesh compared to USDT0. So to give you a couple of numbers, the Legacy Mesh moved, give or take, $500 million USDT since our launch in what was it? I think it was March when we launched the Legacy Mesh. While in the same time, USDT0 moved like 5 billion. So we are seeing quite some friction on that side. But it's also a testament to the fact that, again, the more barriers you remove, the more people will just organically use your product and organically use your product every single time they need it. There's one thing I wanted to say. You mentioned something about the best use case, right? There's two aspects here. There is the cross-chain use case that USDT0 has, and then it has the inherent USDT use case. Right? Like, again, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We just add a cool functionality on top of the best possible asset on planet Earth. We are effectively standing on the shoulders of the giants that Paul and the rest of the Tether team are, right? So what we are seeing, for example, on Arbitrum, which is right now our largest deployment, tons of different use cases. You have centralized exchanges, you have peer-to-peer payment processors, you have on-ramp and off-ramp tooling, you have actual real people moving USDT between each other because they just have to. I live in Lugano, which is in Switzerland, and here we have something called the Lugano Plan B, which means that you can go around and you can pay with Bitcoin and USDT in more than 350 shops around the city, and that's also part of what we are optimizing for. Right, like we, in some ways, we're kind of like a rib of Tether, if you will, and Tether has always been the king in those kind of use cases, and that's what we're also trying to improve every day.
I mean, it sounds like you kind of had the perfect recipe, right? Like, in a way, how you described it, like you're standing on the shoulders of giants. With USDT having so much credibility, a lot of the stuff was relatively easier for you because the trust was already built, right? But then even then, you've pulled many levers in the form of like native chain deployments, making centralized exchanges kind of use your infrastructure. But do you think with so many stable coins kind of launching today, like they don't have the same luxury, right? So what's the thesis with all of these stable coins coming to market? Like how do they get that sort of like distribution? Is that even possible, or will they be kind of confined to the specific company's ecosystem?
Well, another very, very good question, I would say. Again, usual disclaimer, big fan of USDT, and I'm definitely biased when it comes to this kind of question, right? I think that it's pretty clear that stablecoins have been, are currently, and will be one of, if not the largest backbone of crypto, right? And I do understand that it does make sense that everyone right now is trying to own a piece of that and try to create their own idea behind it. At the same time, I do not currently see, again, I'm biased, I don't want to sound cocky because it's all Tether's job for it.
The numbers do the job for you, like the revenue
kinda,
numbers.
Yes. Kind of, yes. The Tether team has been winning all over the place, and I personally do not see somebody coming in and disrupting this winning narrative. There's multiple reasons for it, right? Like, I remember when PayPal first created the stablecoin, I was very, very concerned because I was like, wow, they have the best possible distribution network on planet Earth, or one of the best possible distribution network on planet Earth. They're definitely going to eat up a lot of market share. And they didn't. And there's multiple reasons for that. And my personal opinion is that the only stablecoin company in the whole world, or at least that I know of, that is building for the right user group is Tether. Like, I do believe that stablecoins are revolutionizing all of our lives. But for someone like me and you that live in Western countries where it's very, very easy to bank account, I mean, I'm in Switzerland, I can probably get a bank account in 1 hour. A stablecoin doesn't change my life radically. But imagine that you are in Congo or in Namibia or in Tanzania or in any of those countries where the banking infrastructure is not developed and it's not trying to be more developed, right? I think Paulos says it always very, very nicely when he says that I think you need to produce at least $100 in fees for a bank to be a viable customer. And in those places, it's just not there, right? Like people are maybe working for 10, 15 days a week, 15 euros a week or dollars a week. It's a totally different market share and market set. And that is really where Tether won. Like all of those users are using Tether because they're hedging themselves against either their failing currencies or a system that was rigged against them. And to my knowledge, there's no other centralized stablecoin provider that is focusing on that user group. Like you have Circle that is obviously focusing a lot in the US, but I don't think that's going to be the big game changer. And Tether kind of won it.
I mean,
At the same time, just last thing, because I also don't want to sound too Italian on that. Competition is always good, right? Like competition is what makes people better and what makes products and companies better, and ultimately the life of the end user better. Like I don't know if we would have come up with USDT0 if Circle didn't pioneer CCTP. What was it, 2 years ago? So I'm definitely interested to see how the landscape will change, and I think some very big players are going to come in, right? Like we're now having nation states trying to do their own stablecoin, which is quite surreal if you ask me.
yeah, I mean the Tether adoption in places like Africa is unprecedented, right? Because it's now at the grassroots level. So even if the government tries to like stop the growth of the adoption, like they cannot do it because it's literally in the hands of the users at this point. So I don't think there's an alternative for some of the third world countries other than stable coins like USDT. But I do think like in places like the US where USDC has some sort of like a better presence, I would say, and then the stablecoin bill is getting passed, so there's more ways for new companies to kind of come up. You can see how there will be more competition in the US and maybe in the EU at some point.
100%. And listen, it's always good, right? Like we're building, like the fact that Tether didn't win before the game was played, right? Like they were the first one to play the game, but they keep winning every single day. And I think it's just very, very important that we always have new players entering the industry with new, fresh ideas, new way of distributing the asset, and so on and so forth, which effectively ends up making the industry better, the product that the end user gets better, and makes ourselves better because we basically challenge all of those new incumbents on a daily basis.
Okay, do you see Twitter launching their own stablecoin? I feel like at some point we will see that happen.
Dude, that would be so fun. I just like, I don't think launching the stablecoin is the hard part. I think is convincing people that do not need to use the stablecoin to use the
But that's the
stablecoin
thing. Like all
is
of
the
these
hard part,
social
right?
media companies, they have their own distribution, right? So like Facebook tried to launch Libra in 2019. So I can definitely see how X can now with Elon Musk, like he already has some sort of like crypto alignment. They can definitely launch a stablecoin and then try to distribute it across their user base.
For sure. And by the way, Libra was a pretty, I mean, I always was very fascinated by the design that Libra chose, but I agree with you. Like you have the distribution channel, but at the same time, if there is not a better alternative, but an alternative where users are just more used to, you're not going to use stablecoins. I think PayPal USD is the perfect example, right? I use PayPal three times a week, at least, to send money to my non-crypto friends and so on and so forth. And yet I never used or held PayPal USD in my specific case. At the same time, you also have the other way of seeing this, right? Like you have platforms like Telegram and Ton that decided to integrate USDT within their infrastructure. Which, just so you know, like I always say this because it's one of the few moments, one of the few what the fuck moments that I had in the last 2 years. I was having dinner with a friend of mine in Italy in a tiny village, like 10,000 people, where I was born, like tiny. And I paid for his dinner, and he said, "Well, can I send you? I don't have my wallet with me, but can I send you back US dollars?" And I was like, "How the fuck are you gonna send me back US dollars? You have a bank account in Italy in euros. I have a bank account in Switzerland with Swiss francs. What are you talking about?" They said, "Well, there is this thing called USDT on Telegram now. If you want, I can send it over to you." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll take it. Do you know what it is?" And he was like, "I don't know. It looks like it'd be US dollar." I was like, "Yeah, definitely." So, so I think that's the correct way of doing it. I understand that everybody wants a piece of the stablecoin game because as Tether can say, it's very, very profitable. But at the same time, that's not how you win it. You win it by making people's life significantly better, and then you make them shift their old habits.
I mean, I do think like the users are very opinionated about what currency they trade in, right? Like, I mean, we're opinionated about our food. So let alone the fact that if PayPal has a stablecoin, even if I'm using their app and I trust USDT more, I will just always end up using the stablecoin of my choice, right? Like that, there's just no question about it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And then like even in apps they have their own wallets, they have their own currencies, but you never end up using their infrastructure. You have your own bank account, you have like your own payment services that you always kind of resort to. So I don't see how it should be any different for stablecoins. Like it doesn't matter if you have your own. If people just prefer USDT or USDC, like or any token of their choice, they will just end up using it.
I agree, but at the same time, I remember when I went to DevCon in Bogota. What was it, 3 years and a half ago? It was the first time that I actually was in Latin America as a grown up, if you can call me a grown up, I guess, as a grown up, and I was in this hotel, and I needed some cash, and for the first time, I used USDT on Tron. And immediately I realized that everyone in Bogota was accepting USDT on Tron. Every single one had a wallet that they could accept USDT on. And it kind of was an eye-opening moment for me, right? Because I always knew about the fact that, third world countries or less developed countries are using USDT, but I never actually seen it with my own eyes. And the moment I found it, then I started noticing it everywhere else. Like in Turkey, everywhere you go, you can pay with BTC, USDT, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, Tether Gold. So big fan of Tether Gold also, so I have to shield it a little bit as well.
Right, so
But yeah, so
lovely.
it's
So we
just
should
everywhere.
definitely talk about Tether Gold because I feel like you guys launched it 2-3 weeks ago, the omnichain version of it, but
Yeah.
I never really got into the thesis of it, right? So gold is like the number one real world asset, right? But nobody actually talks that much about gold on chain, and you launched it. So what's the thesis behind Tether Gold and your omnichain version?
So let's start by doing a quick introduction on what Tether Gold is, right? Because I do believe that not many people know about this or know how it
But
works.
why is that
Uh,
though?
that's a good question. I could, I mean, first of all, I think we are early on the curve. Like we're definitely preparing for infrastructure that maybe will not be used in the next 2 years, but they will definitely be used in the next 10 years. Right. So Tether Gold is a stablecoin in the exact way as USDT is a stablecoin. The only difference is that instead of being denominated in US dollar, it's denominated in ounces of gold. And there is one big difference between Tether Gold and some of its other competitors is that Tether Gold is effectively backed by actual bars of gold held in Switzerland. So each Tether Gold represents the partial, depending on how much you have, obviously, a partial ownership of a specific bar gold in a vault in Switzerland, held by the entity that issues Tether Gold, which I think it's called Tether Gold Community, but it might have commodities, but I don't want to say anything stupid. So go check out on the Tether Gold team, on Tether Gold website, exactly what the entities are. So we are in this situation where you can effectively own, spend, save, or use a real representation of gold on the blockchain. We start with that. I think it was launched in late 2020. It's now hovering around $1 billion in market cap, and it's been steadily growing since then, effectively. And historically, like, I studied economics and finance when I was in uni, and I always remember my macroeconomics professor telling me that gold has always been the best way to store value. Why?
Until
Because,
Bitcoin.
well, we're going to touch on that. I don't think gold is in competition with Bitcoin. I think gold is in competition with fiat currencies, right? Back in when the Roman Empire was working in Italy, I don't know, 3,000 years ago or something. Well, yeah, a little bit less, I guess. My history teacher would kill me. But an ounce of gold could buy you a tunic, sandals, and a sword. And now with an ounce of gold, you can buy yourself a pair of sneakers, trousers, t-shirts, and a gun. Like the purchasing power remains the same. The problem with gold is that it's extremely difficult to use, spend, transfer, and save it. Because, I mean, try going in the middle of Milan with a gold coin and try to buy, I don't know, a watch with it, right? Like it's not going to be this simple. And here comes Tether Gold, where they're basically taking the safest asset on planet Earth, the asset on which arguably humankind was created, and they're putting it on this new technology, which is the blockchain, which opens up an insanely wide set of possibilities, right? Like you can spend it without being worried about being kidnapped because somebody sees you going around with a bar of gold that weighs 12 kilos. You can save in it. Like it's very simple to buy Tether Gold. There is liquidity on chain and there is liquidity on centralized exchanges. And I don't know when is the last time that you went to your bank and tried to buy some gold. I did it 2 weeks ago and they asked me for something like 60 bips and it told me that it would take them 3 days. I was like, wow, you're all dinosaurs, guys. so there is that. And then on top of it, you have all of the DeFi aspect that is coming up, which as a DeFi guy, as I still think I am, it makes it so incredibly powerful. Like being able to take your gold and take open up a borrow position on Aave and borrowing USDT with it. It's to me one of the best use cases that we have ever seen for the blockchain. Now we are early. I totally agree. We are 100% early, but I believe that in the future we're going to see gold eating up more and more of the US dollar market share in the minds of people. And with XCT0, all we're doing, again, is taking this amazing asset that Tether Gold and the Tether Gold team created and just bringing it to all of the chains that want it and that have a solid plan to grow it. We pioneered it on Ton, where obviously all of the Telegram users were a great basket to pioneer it on. We then launched it on HyperEVM. We received some amazing feedbacks. We're still struggling a little bit to acquire some liquidity on the order book, but we have seen really a ton of adoption, a ton of volume, and a lot of demand. Like the hyperliquid ecosystem and the community, which is amazing, by the way, they really went crazy for it because now they could immediately hold gold and then in the future potentially trade the leverage gold and so on and so forth, completely in a permissionless way. So that's what we're doing. The only big advantage between USDT0 and XAUT0 is that XAUT is only native on Ethereum. So on every new chain, it's going to go through XAUT0. And because of that, it's going to create such an amazing network effect where users will not have even to worry about the chain that they're on. They're just going to worry about the asset that they want. And then transferring it between, I don't know, Polygon and Arbitrum will be as simple as transferring it to Lorenzo.eth to Arjun.eth.
Yeah, I mean, so the thesis behind the omnichain version of gold is not really the cross-chain aspect of it, right? Like I don't think anybody would probably move it from one chain to another. But the point is that there's access on different chains. Like irrespective of where you have funds, you can buy gold on any chain. Like I think that's much stronger than like the cross-chain aspect of it.
Yeah, it's both. I mean, the cross-chain aspect is just one little detail that makes everyone's life better without deteriorating the life of everyone. You know what I mean? So it's effectively that, and it's something that we really are focusing on every day. Now, obviously, we are definitely prepared for the fact that it's going to take more time to start penetrating with XAUT around the industry. But I mean, I don't want to speak for Tether, but I think a big part of the focus of the Tether team is to grow Tether Gold. And I strongly believe that it's going to happen very, very slow and then all at once. Because sooner or later, something will happen to the US dollar. That's my immediate feeling. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years. And I do not see an asset that could take the place of the US dollar as well as Tether Gold, assuming that Bitcoin isn't yet yet ready to take its place.
I mean, so on the one hand, you're building USDT, which is backed by the US dollar, and then your hedge is gold, and then all the crypto people, of course, have Bitcoin, right? So we kind of have our foot in all of these different boats at this point.
Kind of, yes. And I mean, I would love to be able to create an omnichain version of BTC, but there is one big difference, that BTC is meant to be a fully decentralized asset without any single point of failure or point of centralizations. USDT and XAUT are not. Like there is Tether behind it, right? And that's why our system works so well.
I mean, so I can definitely see how gold on chain for someone like me who's more into crypto than probably like I'm not going to go buy the bank ETF gold version, right? So I can see how the easy access is just such a big unlock. Maybe I would buy the physical gold as well, because there's just like something about having something physical in your hand, right? And something like gold is just so valuable. But I do see the point of, like, I love the use case that you mentioned, that I can buy gold on chain and then lend it, get USDT in return, and then use that across the DeFi ecosystem. Like, it's very simple, but it's such a big thing, because like gold you want to hold for the long term, and then once you lend it, you get like cash flow for doing your monthly kind of daily trading or whatever.
Yeah, and by the way, you can redeem Tether Gold. So if you're, again, I don't want to say anything stupid, so go check out on the Tether Gold website, but I'm 99% sure that if you are in Switzerland, you can effectively redeem your gold. It's going to cost you a fortune, because obviously they have to send you a shipment of gold, which is quite difficult to secure. But if you want to, you can. And I mean, I've seen it happening. People that had Tether Gold and that they wanted to have their physical gold now in their safe or whatever they wanted to put it, and they just redeemed it with Tether Gold. Tether gave them the bar of gold, and then now you can easily go and store it wherever you want. So that's also why I like Tether Gold so much, because it's effectively a representation of physical gold. It's not just like paper gold, gold ETF held somewhere, you know?
Lovely. I mean, so like my last question for this conversation is, what's next for USDT0? Like, how do you expand further? How do you accelerate what's already been like a rampant adoption over the last 6 months, right? Like, what's next on your roadmap?
Fuckload of things. Well, we're very, first of all, we're very humbled by the success that we got, and it feels very nice to wake up every day and see real people using your product. But at the same time, it makes you hungrier and hungrier, right? Like our goal is to basically be able, as soon as possible, to unify this liquidity layer that we are creating across new chains that are coming, chains that have not yet been added to the USDT0 network, and then maybe in the future also find better solutions to include those chains that currently have other representation of USDT on them. We are going to be, I cannot tell you the names, otherwise my marketing team might shoot me right in the spot. But we have 3 large deployments coming up before the end of the summer, and we have 1 very large migration that we are handling with. So as soon as those will be ready, we're basically going to cover those 4 bases. Then hopefully we're going to be at the end of Q3, start of Q4. Hopefully the Tether Alliance chains will be ready to launch. So we're going to be very, very excited to support Plasma with all of its pre-committed TVL. And if you ask me, we're going to see more and more TVL flowing into the chain right from where we launch. Reason being that the Plasma team has been one of the most competent teams that I've seen in the industry for a while now. They're really amazing, and they decided to build it on the right asset. So definitely excited about that. We're going to have other Tether line chains. Stable is one of them. You mentioned them before. Another great team. They're taking a very unique approach to the gas fee problem. Like their whole idea is that rather than having a gas fee token and a stablecoin, we're just going to make the stablecoin the gas fee token of the chain. Which I should ask you, but to my knowledge, it's the first time that an OFT is a gas token, right? I think. I'm not 100% sure, but it should be, right?
Probably, like as a stable coin, definitely. But I do think there were some chains that have their own token as the token, like the gas token.
Yeah, could be. So it's going to be very exciting to see how that plays out. Mega ETH is going to launch hopefully by the end of the year, which is another ecosystem that we are very, very close with. Obviously, they've been one of our launch partners. Great team, amazing executioners, and the technology is very, very cool. So yeah, I mean, keep proliferating this technology, keep being able to give to the ecosystems and the chains that they want and that they have a good and solid plan to grow the stablecoin on their chain, the ability to actually acquire this technology and use it in their day-to-day basis. Doing the same for Tether Gold, and then hopefully in the next couple of years, we're going to have this conversation again where we're going to be moving trillions of USDT between chains every month, I hope.
I mean, anything less than that is not a success. So no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. I mean, I was expecting to reach half a billion a week, maybe by the end of 2025. I was definitely not expecting it to happen in the first 2 quarters of our launch year, right? So it's definitely insane. And then when Plasma, which is another billion in TVL from day zero, will come in, when this other ecosystem that has another billion or so USDT will be added to the network, I do see us hitting the billion and a half a week mark pretty soon. And again, we're not making money out of that volume. We don't care about making money out of the volume. What we care about is seeing this adoption and proving also to the Tether team and the Tether ecosystem that the moment you give this kind of technology to people, they're just going to use it like crazy. And it's been very, very fun to see it happening, if you will.
I mean, I tweeted this today, but I do think that in 2025, USDT0, at least especially in interop, like that was the biggest thing to happen. So I'm really great. I'm really happy to see like how you guys have done in the first half of the year, and hopefully in the second half you can keep up the momentum. And there's like so many more catalysts and flywheels coming up with the chains and all the different chain launches that I feel like you will definitely like reach your goal. So all the best for that. And thanks a lot for your time today. Hopefully we can do this next year.
Well, whenever you want. And again, just to say, again, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like Layer Zero laid the path work. Tether laid the foundation of this economy. We're just connecting dots and making a product that users want to use. So this is something that we hope to be able to keep doing for the longest time possible. And it was a real pleasure to be here with you. And again, big fan of everything you guys have been doing over at Li.F in general, and specifically you and with the podcast is one of the things that I like listening the most. When I was in Token 2049, I listened to the one that you made with Brian, the CEO of Layer Zero, while I was training, and it was the only break I got all week, so it was definitely appreciated.
Nice, lovely. It was lovely meeting you in Dubai, and then like definitely one of the nicest, most humble people I've met in crypto. So hopefully we can meet again, and then I would take you out for coffee to like pay you back for this interview.
Yes, I'll definitely take up on the coffee, or if you ever come around Switzerland, let me know. We have nice steaks, nice chocolate, and coffee's okay, I guess.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for your time.
Pleasure.